stepdad. My stepmom at the time. My stepmom at the time is a story for another time. Trust me on that one. But she truly hated my guts. When I say that I was the redheaded stepchild, I truly was the redheaded stepchild. I could tell you so many instances, but that, like I said, a story for another time, honestly. But I tried praying, I tried praying and trusting that God would get me out of my home life, and by the time I was 16, I had declared myself an atheist. I still had to go to church with my stepdad and bio mom and pretend that I was a believer. I started coming up with excuses as to why I did not want to go. I could not tell them that I was no longer believing in God. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. My name is Brittany, and this is a new podcast of mine. This podcast is actually called um Sa- Southern Sass and Grace. Now growing up in the deep South by my grandparents, they instilled in me two very important things. The second of those two were manners and respect. The first of those two was were God and faith. Now, notice how I listed those things. They believed that manners were important, and they also believed more than anything that having a relationship with God and Jesus was also super important. So, they made sure we participated in Sunday school, in VBS, and church Christmas plays. You would think that would not make me lose faith in God, right? Well, Um, the thing is that my childhood was not the easiest to grow up in, and I will not go through every detail about what happened behind the scenes. By 16, I proclaimed myself as an atheist. My home life was so bad that I was so angry at God. I kept asking why He hasn't gotten me out of this hellhole. Excuse my language. But you see, at a young age, I had to grow up fast, and I had to learn that that I needed to be a chameleon and keep my nose clean. That still didn't help the abuse right there. Now, I learned how to act so my stepdad would not yell at us. I learned what not to say to hide the abuse, I faced as a kid from my bio dad and my stepdad. My stepmom my stepmom at the time is a story for another time. Trust me on that one. But she truly hated my guts. When I say that I was the redheaded stepchild, I truly was the redheaded stepchild. I could tell you so many instances, but that, like I said, a story for another time, honestly. But I tried praying, I tried praying and trusting that God would get me out of my home life, and by the time I was 16, I had declared myself an atheist. I still had to go to church with my stepdad and bio mom and pretend that I was a believer. I started coming up with excuses as to why I did not want to go. I could not tell them that I was no longer believing in God. Um, and everything. So, now, fast forward to 18. I left home 3 days after I graduated from high school. And at first, I was with a cousin that I am not in contact with anymore. That's personal, and I'm not going to dive too much into that. 3 months later, I was living in this little town in Hayden, Alabama, with some family, and I was a hot mess. I was getting sexually abused. Yeah, and everything else. I was avoiding not taking care of my mental health, and I was raised by a generation where mental health was a stigma. It's not a stigma now, and I'm always working on it. I'm so thankful it's not a stigma. Anyway, let's fast forward um to a few years. Sorry, y'all, I'm gonna eat my supper as well. Because I really want to get this episode out tomorrow. But a few more years, and I would meet my family. This would become my unofficial adopted family, the family that I wish I had growing up. And the first of those would be Miss Christy Hicks. She is the director of campus ministries at Wallace State Community College. And I soon met her husband and her boys, who became my dad and brothers. I also started participating a lot with campus ministries, and eventually I found myself slowly starting to believe in God again. Once I started going to church, I became a born again Christian. For more years, I surrendered myself to God. I was laying in bed one night. I was brokenhearted from liking this guy who only saw me as a friend. Here's the thing, I'm not the girl that guys date. I'm the girl that guys are friends with, but never really want to date. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I know I'm going to find someone one day, but I surrendered myself to God that night, and I made a promise that night I would surrender. That night I surrendered to Him. I also made I also told him that I also made a promise to him that the next guy I like was going to be the one that he picked out for me. And after I surrendered myself to him, I felt this heavy burden of life begin to lift from me. And I thought that Jesus would be mad at me. I thought that losing my faith in him would make him not want me to accept me back. His love is forgiving. He accepted me with open arms. And here's the thing, Isaiah 30:18 tells us that the Lord must wait for you to come to him so he can show you his love and compassion. He has been holding my hand, and he has been my light, even when I was in my darkness. Looking back, honestly, I just think I lost faith in God. And we just kind of lost this whole this whole not communication track for a while. But I also like to think that he was still my light, even in my darkest moments and everything. I'm happy to say that it's been 7 years since I wanted to unalive myself, and he has been a guiding presence in keeping me from drowning. I now live in the Nashville, Tennessee area. I am a born again Christian. Um, and I'm also human. I struggle with jealousy, being perfect, being kind, and so much more. My journey with God is my journey, and I believe that we all have a journey with God. I was baptized as a Methodist at a very young age. I grew up going to church at a very young age. So, and I didn't really understand what it was like to have a relationship with God. And I don't think you really know that as a kid, like when you're baptized that young. And I grew up with my grandparents most of my childhood, so that's something we've got to understand as well. But I'm a believer in God, and I want people to know that. I am now baptized as a Baptist. Both my parents are preachers. My mom is the campus ministries director at Wallace State Community College, and my dad is a preacher. So he has a church called Good Shepherd Community Church in Hayden, Alabama. I just, like I said, I'm a believer God, and I want people to know I was raised in Grace and Sass. And as someone who is from a small towns in rural Alabama, to living in Nashville area, I like to think I've done pretty well for myself. Done pretty well, and that I've come a long way, both as a believer and as a person. And I hope that y'all have enjoyed this very first episode of Southern Grace and Class. Also, go check out my merch shop if you would like a merch shirt. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Um, for more episodes like this. I'm not a pastor. I am a disciple of God. I am a child of God who is imperfect and human. Now, before I leave, I want to end this episode with a Bible verse from Galatians 6:9, and it tells us, "Let us not become tired of doing good, for at the proper time we will reap the harvest if we do not give up." And I think that's just something important and everything else. I know it was short. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I've come a long way since I first started my podcast. My Just a Breezy Chat podcast will be coming to an end after season 10. So this is going to become one of my new permanent podcasts to be working on. And I'm very excited. But y'all have a blessed day. Y'all have a great day. Y'all, I'm just going to pray for you. And I hope that, and I want you to know that God is watching out for you no matter what.